Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And in a relationship with a narcissist, the shadow is not only the dark part of their psyche, it is also the veil that blinds us, making us mistake charm for truth. From a Jungian psychology perspective, narcissistic behavior is not merely arrogance or selfishness, it is a complex defense mechanism fueled by the fear of exposure, an obsession with self-image, and a complete disconnection from genuine empathy. In today's video, you'll discover a 5-second test, a simple yet remarkably accurate tool that can expose the true nature of a narcissist even when they're at the peak of their seductive performance. We break down why moments of surprise or loss of control cause the mask to slip so quickly, and how the principle of observing rather than reacting can bring you back into your own power. Stay until the end, because I'll not only show you how to apply this test, but also help you understand, through Jung's lens, how narcissism operates via the shadow, the persona, and the process of individuation, so you can not only recognize them, but also understand and protect yourself against that dangerously magnetic pull. Part 1. 5 seconds can expose an entire person. There are brief moments whose power far exceeds what you might imagine. In just 5 seconds, 5 slow, measured breaths, you can see straight through the flawless aura a narcissist has so carefully built. This is not guesswork or some vague gut feeling. It's an observational principle drawn from both modern psychology and the insight of Carl Jung, who once stated, "The shadow is that part of ourselves we least want to recognize." And it is precisely that shadow which, when illuminated by truth, reacts faster than any mask can cover it. A narcissist lives on control. They are skilled in the art of captivating and enchanting others with polished appearances, smooth words, and calculated attentiveness. In the early stages of any relationship, whether romantic, professional, or platonic, they make you believe you are dealing with someone trustworthy, magnetic, and deeply engaging. But what you see in those moments is merely the persona, as Jung called it, the social mask, designed to impress, not to reveal the real self. The truth doesn't take months or years to emerge. It appears in the instant the balance of power shifts. This might happen when you gently challenge their opinion in front of others, refuse a request, or share a vulnerable feeling expecting empathy in return. In the 5 seconds that follow, if you remain calm, without rushing to explain or soothe, you will see the real reaction. A fleeting frown, a sudden chill in their gaze, a stiffened smile, or a deliberate silence, all are signs of the inner shadow flaring up. Why only 5 seconds? Because instinct surfaces before reason. They haven't yet had time to prepare a replacement script or reconstruct the mask. That moment is like switching on a light in a dark room. Dust, hidden corners, everything they thought was concealed suddenly becomes visible. If you are attentive, you'll recognize that what you're seeing is not the perfect version they want you to believe in, but their most unfiltered fragment: fear, anger, or contempt. This is why the 5-second test requires no advanced academic training or decades of research. It demands only one thing: your presence. You don't react, don't retreat, don't justify, you observe. And in that silence, the mask slips on its own. Part 2. Why 5 seconds is enough. We often believe it takes a long time to truly understand someone's nature: weeks, months, even years of observation, conversation, and shared experiences before drawing a conclusion. But with a narcissist, the truth works differently. What you need to see their essence is not endless dialogue or stacks of evidence. It's 5 seconds, exactly 5 seconds of observation after a moment when they lose control. Carl Jung pointed out that the shadow, the deepest, most hidden part of the psyche, never disappears. It is merely repressed, covered by layers of persona, the social mask, that people wear to fit in and make an impression. Narcissists are masters at crafting a persona. They choose their words to charm, use eye contact to create a false sense of intimacy, and adjust their behavior to keep you inside their sphere of control. But all these skills depend on one condition. Everything must go according to their script. The instant the script is disrupted, when you say no, when you set a boundary, or when you receive attention they wanted for themselves, is the moment their shadow rises to the surface. Instinct reacts before reason. In that fleeting space, you will notice a subtle but unmistakable shift. A frozen smile, a change in tone, eyes turning cold, or a flash of irritation crossing their face. It takes only seconds before they reel it back in, reclaim their role, and resume the performance as if nothing happened. What makes these 5 seconds so valuable is that they occur before the social filter can kick in. No one can perform flawlessly when caught off guard, especially when the ego is under threat. Jung once said, "You cannot become conscious without first confronting your own shadow." And since narcissists will never willingly face theirs, when it does surface, their reaction is raw, unedited, and entirely authentic. That's why, instead of getting caught up in dissecting every word they say or trying to gather proof over a long period, you can train yourself to stay silent and simply observe in these precious moments. Resist the urge to fill the gap with explanations or apologies. That stillness becomes a mirror, forcing them to reveal what they most want to hide. And once you've seen that moment for yourself, you'll understand why it doesn't take years to recognize a narcissist. It only takes 5 seconds, with clear eyes and a mind free from illusion. Part 3. The difference between performing and being present. In the early days of meeting them, a narcissist can make you believe you've just found someone extraordinary. They know how to create an attractive energy field, eyes locked on you, captivating stories, generous gestures. You feel understood, seen, and cared for in a special way. But what you are experiencing is not genuine presence. It's a carefully staged performance designed to create an effect. Carl Jung called this outer shell the persona, the social mask we present to the world in order to be accepted and admired. For a narcissist, the persona is a survival tool. It is meticulously constructed like a play, every line, every nod, every laugh calculated to maintain power and admiration. In the beginning, you only see the persona, a flawless version, crafted to target your desires and vulnerabilities. The truth emerges only when the stage lights go out, when the role no longer brings benefit. This is when real presence is tested. A truly present person will remain with you even when you have nothing to give, when you are tired, weak, or unable to meet their needs. They don't just hear, they listen. They don't just look, they see. Their care does not vanish when you are no longer useful to their storyline. A narcissist is different. When you share something vulnerable, they may respond with words that sound caring, but their eyes have already drifted away, their voice lacks warmth, or the conversation is quickly redirected back to them. This is how you tell performance from presence. Performance lasts only as long as you are beneficial. Presence endures even when there is nothing to gain. Jung once said, "No one can escape having a persona, but if we mistake it for our true self, we live in illusion." A narcissist lives entirely in that illusion. They identify with the persona and see it as the shield protecting their fragile ego. But this very attachment makes true connection impossible, because real connection requires removing the mask and allowing the shadow to be seen and accepted. When you understand the difference between performance and presence, you stop being pulled into the whirlpool of illusion. You begin to see who truly stands beside you, and who is merely playing a role to keep you in their story. And this awareness is one of the first keys to breaking free from a narcissist's manipulation. Part 4. When empathy is just an act. Real empathy is not found in mechanical phrases like, "I understand," or "that's terrible for you." Empathy is a living capacity to step out of your own self, place yourself in another's position, and feel their pain or joy as if it were your own. But for a narcissist, empathy is not a natural reflex. It is a technique, a prop in their director's toolkit. Carl Jung would call this a kind of artificial empathy, a product of the persona, not of the true core. In the early stages, when they still need to impress you or maintain the relationship for personal gain, they can play the role of a caring person flawlessly. They lean toward you, nod at the right moments. Ask timely questions, even echo your emotions as if they truly share them. But this is only surface reflection. It never touches the shadow where the capacity for real empathy resides. The problem is, false empathy can't last. When you become useless to their goals, when you no longer provide admiration, attention, or material emotional benefit, you'll see the act collapse quickly. They may change the subject, downplay your issue, or worse, turn your story into theirs. In that moment, you feel abandoned, even though they're still sitting right in front of you. Jung once said, "The shadow is the part of ourselves we deny and refuse to acknowledge." A narcissist avoids looking at their shadow because it contains deep-seated insecurity, shame, and fear. Real empathy requires them to connect with that darkness, to understand another's pain. But they choose avoidance, building instead a caring person persona as a tool to maintain power. You can sense the difference through your own feelings. With a truly empathetic person, you feel lighter, heard, and safe to open up. With a narcissist, even in moments when they appear to care, you sense an invisible distance, a cold emptiness. Their energy doesn't match their words. That's when you realize a narcissist's empathy is nothing more than part of the performance. And once you see this clearly, you stop seeking understanding from someone who cannot feel it. You turn back toward connection with yourself rather than clinging to an illusion. Part 5. The unexpected question, the blade that cuts through the mask. A narcissist can control every detail when things go according to the script they've written. They know how to answer everyday questions smoothly, how to steer the conversation so they are always the central figure. What they can't prepare for are unexpected questions, questions that force them out of the safe zone of their role and into the raw territory of truth. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing is more frightening than to look at oneself honestly." A simple question that demands honesty will go straight to the shadow. A narcissist does not want anyone to see. For example, what have you learned from your biggest mistake? Or, how do you usually respond when someone close to you is feeling sad? These are not trick questions or accusations. They are invitations to go inward, something a narcissist avoids at all costs. When faced with such a moment, emotionally mature people will often pause, think, and, if needed, admit to their struggles. A narcissist reacts differently. In the first few seconds, you may see them flinch, their smile stiffens, their eyes dart, their voice shifts. That is the moment the mask slips, revealing discomfort or defensiveness. They may give a vague answer, change the subject, or turn the question into a reason to attack you. Why would you ask that? Or, what's that got to do with you? At the core, they can't answer deeply because doing so requires humility, self-reflection, and a connection with their own emotions, skills they have never developed. Instead, they try to regain control by putting you on the defensive. This is a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, avoiding truth by reasserting control of the situation. The key here is not the answer itself, but the moment before they have time to edit it. If you observe, instead of rushing to respond, you'll clearly see the gap between the persona and their true self. Jung would say this is the rare window that lets you glimpse the shadow, the place where the fear of exposure lives. Once you learn to recognize this moment, you'll no longer be swayed by polished words or a perfect exterior. You'll know that with just the right question and a few seconds of silence, you can see straight through the mask they've worked their whole life to protect. Part 6. 5 seconds after you say no. For a healthy person, hearing a no might cause a moment of disappointment, but they quickly adjust, respect boundaries, and try to build mutual understanding. For a narcissist, no is more than a word. It's a direct blow to their ego, a challenge to the control they believe they naturally possess. Carl Jung once said, "Anything that causes us intense anger is often touching on a part of the shadow within us." For a narcissist, rejection is a mirror reflecting that shadow. When you say no, observe immediately. In the first 5 seconds, if you remain silent without explaining, without rushing to smooth things over, you will see their true nature surface. It might be narrowed eyes, the corner of their mouth curling into a bitter smile, or a tense silence that feels like a threat. Sometimes it's just a subtle shift in tone from warm to icy, or a sarcastic remark meant to deflect. Whatever form it takes, the message is the same. You've just touched a place they cannot control. The crucial part is not to rush to fill that space. The pause after refusal is like shining a flashlight directly into the shadow they've hidden away. If you speak too soon, you give them time to slip back into character and hide the real reaction. But if you wait patiently and watch, you'll notice that their ego reacts faster than their reason, and that's the most authentic glimpse you'll ever get. Jung would explain this reaction as the persona cracking. They've built their self-image on power and compliance from others. When you break the script with a refusal, they lose not only situational control, but are also forced to confront their deepest fear, that they are not important enough, not powerful enough to make you submit. Recognizing this reaction is a turning point. Once you see that shadow clearly, you're no longer enchanted by their polished exterior or smooth words. You understand that your refusal is not hostility, it's a mirror reflecting how dependent they are on control. And in those 5 seconds of silence, you don't just see their true self, you reclaim your own power. Part 7. When reaction is faster than thought. An emotionally mature person, when questioned or confronted with something unpleasant, usually pauses. They breathe, think, and then respond. This pause is not just politeness, it's a sign of emotional self-regulation, of a willingness to self-reflect. But with a narcissist, that pause is almost non-existent. Their reaction bursts out faster than thought, as if a deeply ingrained defense mechanism is instantly triggered the moment their ego is touched. Carl Jung once said, "What we refuse to face in ourselves will return to us as fate." For a narcissist, the shadow they refuse to confront is filled with insecurity, shame, and fear of exposure. Because they don't want to face that darkness, they pre-build a rapid response system to protect their self-image. This system often includes blame shifting, sarcasm, minimizing your concerns, or deflecting the conversation onto your flaws. The problem is, these reactions are not the product of careful thought. They're survival reflexes of the ego. They trigger in an instant because the narcissist interprets even mild feedback as a threat to the power and image they work to maintain. In their mind, losing control of the narrative means losing their position as the one in charge in the relationship. If you watch closely, you'll spot signs of this reflex within the first 5 seconds. A shift in the eyes, a hardening of the voice, tension in the facial muscles, or an opening line laced with defensiveness. After that, they'll quickly wrap it in more reasonable-sounding words, but it's that initial flash that contains the truth. Jung would call this the moment when the persona cracks. The social mask doesn't have time to shield them when sudden pressure hits and the shadow flares before they can adjust. Someone with psychological insight will see that a quick, harsh, and overly defensive reaction is not a show of strength, it's evidence of a fragile inner world, constantly on guard to protect the ego. This not only helps you identify a narcissist, but also reminds you of an important truth. When someone reacts faster than they think, it's often the voice of the shadow, not of wisdom. And when you learn to step back, to observe instead of being pulled into a verbal battle, you'll see clearly that true power lies in calmness, not in the speed of a comeback. Part 8. Reflection, a tool for reclaiming power. One of the most common mistakes when dealing with a narcissist is reacting immediately to their jabs, sarcasm, or provocative games. They want you to fall into that trap. Every time you get angry, justify yourself, or try to prove your worth, you're unconsciously feeding them the emotional fuel they need to maintain control. But if you stop, stay silent, and simply reflect back what they are showing, you completely reverse the dynamic. Carl Jung often emphasized that the shadow only emerges when illuminated by the light of awareness. When you reflect a narcissist's behavior with calm composure, you turn yourself into a mirror. And this mirror forces them to see themselves something they hate most. You don't need to argue, persuade, or prove who's right or wrong. You only need to hold your boundaries and let their reaction reveal their own nature. For example, when they deliberately try to provoke you with a loaded remark, instead of engaging in the emotional game, you simply look at them, remain silent for a few seconds, and continue with what you were doing. This calmness unsettles them because they're not getting the emotional response they crave. They may try to escalate, but that's when the persona begins to crack and the shadow erupts. Insecurity, fear of losing control, and suppressed anger. The key is to maintain the role of observer rather than reactor. Jung would call this standing in the witness position, not merging with someone else's emotional storm, but holding the vantage point of clear awareness. From here, you protect yourself from manipulation while gathering genuine information about who you're dealing with. When you become the mirror, the narcissist not only feels powerless, but is also forced, however, briefly to face themselves. They will do everything to avoid it, but the moment will be seared into their memory. You don't win by defeating them in an argument. You win by refusing to step into their script. And here's the secret. A calm, steady response is far more powerful than the sharpest rebuttal. It not only protects your energy, but renders their manipulation useless. When you master the skill of reflection, you realize you don't have to fight to win. You only have to stand firm and let them reveal exactly who they are. Part 9. 5 seconds. The doorway to truth. The 5-second test is not a psychological game to catch someone out. It's an observation principle that helps you clearly distinguish between an emotionally mature person and a narcissist. A moment of surprise, rejection, or loss of control is the most effective litmus test for someone's true character. With a healthy person, when they hear something they disagree with or are faced with a hard truth, they pause, breathe, and think before responding. This pause is a sign of respect for boundaries, proof of self-regulation, and the foundation for building trust. They don't need to rush into a reaction, because they know that listening and understanding matter more than winning a conversation. A narcissist, on the other hand, usually reacts immediately. They redirect the conversation, shift the blame, or turn the situation around to make you defend yourself. Carl Jung once said, "The shadow we do not recognize will rule our life, and we will call it fate." The narcissist's quick, sharp, and defensive reactions are the voice of that shadow, the part they never want to reveal, yet cannot suppress when they lose control. What makes the 5-second test so powerful is this. You don't need to interrogate them, corner them, shout, or argue. You only need to create a moment they didn't anticipate, and then silently observe. In those brief 5 seconds, you'll see their persona, social mask, tremble, and the shadow flash into view before it's covered up again. This observation not only helps you identify them, but also gives you deeper insight into their manipulation patterns. You'll realize that most of the exhaustion in dealing with a narcissist doesn't come from direct conflict, but from the emotional disconnection, something they cannot sustain against because they lack the foundation of empathy. Once you see that clearly, you stop seeking validation from them and instead turn inward to listen to yourself. Jung would call this the moment light shines into darkness. Once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. Those 5 seconds can change the way you perceive people for the rest of your life, not to make you distrustful, but to help you protect your heart from hands unworthy of touching it. 5 seconds. The moment that changes how you see people forever. You see, the power of the 5-second test doesn't lie in its complexity, but in its undeniable simplicity. Just one small situation, one brief moment of silence, and a pair of attentive eyes are enough to see straight through a mask that has been carefully constructed for years. Carl Jung once emphasized, "There is no enlightenment without first confronting your own darkness." And this applies not only to ourselves, but also to those we encounter, especially narcissists. The first 5 seconds after they are rejected, lose control, or face an unexpected question will reveal the shadow they keep hidden. You'll notice the sharp contrast between someone who is emotionally mature and someone who lives entirely in their persona. The mature person pauses to listen and reflect. The narcissist reacts instantly to defend a fragile ego. This brief window is the truth gap, the moment where you can step out of illusion and see reality as it is. The most important part is that you don't need to argue, overpower, or win against anyone. True victory is reclaiming your right to observe, to discern, and to choose who gets access to your life. When you develop this ability, you'll find yourself less pulled into emotional whirlwinds, less drained of your energy, and most importantly, able to know who truly deserves your trust and love. Jung would say this is a step in the journey of individuation, the process of becoming whole, where you not only understand yourself, but also see the world around you with awakened eyes. When you apply the 5-second test, you're not just identifying narcissists, you're also learning to honor your boundaries, protect your heart, and preserve your inner peace. So next time you feel that something is off about someone, don't rush to explain it away or convince yourself you're overthinking. Pause, observe. In just 5 seconds, you can see more clearly than in 5 months of conversation or 5 years of blind trust. If what you've heard today helps you better understand narcissistic behavior and how to protect yourself, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. On this channel, we'll continue exploring deep insights from Carl Jung, decoding the subtle tactics of manipulation and equipping you with tools to stay grounded in any relationship. You deserve to be loved by people who are truly present, and I'm here to walk alongside you on that journey.